let's get to work. The New York Times has a new piece on President Biden as he is a little over a month away from leaving office. It's titled, "A Weary Biden Heads for the Exit." In his final weeks, the president is determined to finish on a high note and shape his legacy. A sprint to the finish line, as Chief of Staff Jeff Zients puts it. The biggest box left is a ceasefire in Gaza. And if he manages that, it would be a validating triumph for a departing president. Otherwise, he is wrapping up his time in office by claiming credit for the healthy economy that he is turning over to his ungrateful successor, and by getting money previously approved by Congress out the door for roads and bridges at home and arms for Ukraine abroad.
And so Jonathan, of course, this Gaza ceasefire has haunted him for some time. I mean, it has been front of mind now for a year. Do they think, we just talked to Jake, sounds like they're optimistic they may get it by the very end.
They're hopeful, but as Jake told us a short time ago, they've been close before and have seen it fall apart. But there's no question President Biden, for more than a year now, deeply frustrated by the situation in Gaza, at times very frustrated with Prime Minister Netanyahu not believing all the time that he was a good faith partner in trying to get a deal, trying to get a ceasefire and those hostages home, believing that the war was a political albatross for him as well, believing that that was a real obstacle to his reelection campaign even before the disastrous debate there in Atlanta. But the fallout, he believes, impacted the vice president's chances as well. It's interesting. Biden has kept a pretty low profile here. In these final weeks, he is an institutionalist. He does believe in not wanting to criticize the incoming administration. He's made his feelings about Donald Trump clear in the past, but he is largely working behind the scenes, trying to get this deal done with a few other events to try to shape his legacy and Trump-proof his accomplishments before his successor comes.
You know, John Heilemann, it's so fascinating. When you look at presidents that leave with lower approval ratings, whether it's George W. Bush, you go back historically to Harry Truman, a lot of times they have economic problems and a lot of other things that are going in different directions. Said it before, 5 years from now, people are going to be looking back most likely at the numbers, the economic numbers that Joe Biden has, and they're going to go, wow, okay, what was that all about? It's sort of like George H.W. Bush. We found out a couple of years later that actually the economy had started growing again in the fourth quarter. But with Biden, you have actually 2 or 3 years of really good economic numbers. You have bipartisan legislation, did a better job on that than any other president in the 21st century. It is interesting right now. He is leaving that picture head down, sort of slowly heading for the exit, not saying a whole lot. I'm wondering, though, what that legacy looks like in 5 years.
Well, I don't know, Joe. I think, history will be, the lead of that story will be, looking back on his time in office, will be, that he was the person who beat Donald Trump in 2020 and helped to end the pandemic. And there will also be a very, right in that double barrel lead, there'll also be that he was essentially forced off the ticket by his own party late in a presidential election year, which is a pretty extraordinary thing. I don't think that good economic numbers or anything else will obscure how singular and how central that will be to his legacy. And there are still, Democrats who think he should never have left the ticket. There are still Democrats who think he should never have run for re-election at all at his age, and that will be pretty fiercely debated for a long time. I will say to John Lemere's point, he's not just been low profile. He has more or less ceded the stage to Donald Trump in this period. And we've had this, he went on that foreign trip recently where I believe I saw some reporting that said he said exactly 7 words to the traveling press while he was out of the country for almost 2 weeks. It's kind of amazing, even for George W. Bush, if you think back, he left office in 2008 with a lower approval rating than Joe Biden has now. His approval rating was in the 20s. But he was still out there trying to kind of shape his legacy, giving farewell addresses and trying to frame his accomplishments. We don't know if Biden's going to do that or not. But right now, it's been kind of amazing the degree to which he's kind of said, not only there's one president that the institutionalists would say, there's one president at a time, he's still president. But really, for a lot of people, it has felt like Donald Trump has been president since Election Day.
So, Rahm Emanuel has a new op-ed for the Washington Post entitled "The Road Back to Power for Democrats." Rahm is currently the ambassador to Japan and was former White House chief of staff for President Obama, and before that, mayor of Chicago and chair of the DCCC. He writes in part this: campaigns of joy in an era of rage don't win elections. The Democratic Party has been blind to the rising sea of disillusionment. In today's America, aspiration and ambition have been supplanted by anger and animosity. Talk about missing the moment. This groundswell of resentment had been simmering for years. Trump just seized on it. Our language and priorities have reinforced the aloof elite stereotype. Trump, on the other hand, captured the underlying zeitgeist. We can no longer tiptoe around the issues that have people worried. November was a jarring reminder that misjudging the mood of a nation can be catastrophic. If Democrats are to make most of the next election, they must ready their message and messengers, abandon failed orthodoxies, and embrace strategies with a record of delivering seats, success, and real prosperity. Joe.
So Rahm talked about several things that he thinks caused Democrats problems, and more importantly, just a mistrust of elites. He talked about those who launched the Iraq War. Are now on corporate boards and didn't pay for any of their tragic misdeeds. He talked about what happened to the banks after the crash of 2008, that the banks just got rich, the rich got richer, and it was the poor that ended up, or the middle class that ended up in trouble. And same thing with the pandemic, shutting down schools and businesses for too long. What do you think about Rahm's diagnosis for what ails the Democrats?
I agree in part. I think that I would not say jarring, because let's remember the Democrats only lost by less than 2%. So we keep acting like there was a landslide against the Democrats. That's not true. I think, though, that Rahm is right. If there had been more emphasis and more projection on the pain that people were feeling, they would have edged that 1.5% and won the election. And they could have identified that a lot of the reason you're hurting is the guy that succeeded Barack Obama and Joe Biden, who did nothing about some of the issues that you're talking about. In fact, cuddled some of the people that benefited and never paid for what happened in terms of the economy collapsing when it did under the last days of George Bush. And I think that Joe Biden had a lot that he could show that was not being pushed out. I think those that were trying to say he's too old, get out, was putting out the accomplishments. Joe Biden really stabilized the economy. He was the most consequential civil rights president in my lifetime. I mean, here's a guy that he just even now during what we've called these quiet times, put the 30th black woman on the federal bench, put her in Georgia. He's put more blacks on the bench than any president. He put a black woman as vice president, a black woman in the Supreme Court, and more black federal judges. I mean, but they were not talking about that. They were talking about identity politics that didn't matter rather than what did matter. So I think Rahm is right. There should have been more emphasis on what they did and more targeting of what Donald Trump would not do and did not do as president.